Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Christina from Our Wood Home. I'm going to be showing you how I make a quick and easy apricot jam in this video. Like all my other jam recipes, this one does not use a lot of sugar, nor does it use commercial pectin. I prefer to use apples or sometimes lemons or maybe even some homemade pectin, but in this video I'll just be using some fresh green apples that I chop up because apples are naturally high in pectin. If you have no idea what pectin is, let me give you a quick explanation. In simple terms, pectin is a naturally occurring substance in a lot of fruits that helps to thicken jam. So you can buy it in liquid form or powdered form from the stores, and sometimes that is a naturally derived pectin, but it might also be a synthetic pectin. And this store-bought pectin works with copious amounts of sugar so that you have a quick process. This jam making method that I use takes me about an hour, sometimes 2 hours, because it relies on the jam cooking down and evaporating a lot of those natural juices. And the naturally occurring pectin from the apples works in conjunction with the sugar that I add to thicken the jam. If you have ever made jam following a recipe on a pectin box, you'll find that it does not take very long at all. It's quite a quick process, which is nice, but it does require a lot of sugar because the commercial pectin is designed to work with that much sugar so that you have a nice quick process. My whole point in saying that is that my jam method is not very quick compared to using commercial pectin, but I still think it's an efficient way to make jam and you get a much nicer product. To make this jam, I used 4 cups of chopped apricots. I kept the skin on, and I also did 2 cups of white sugar. I forgot to film the clip of me cutting up apples, but I used 2 green apples diced up with the peel on. I combined all of this and put it in my Dutch oven, making sure to mix it to coat the fruit evenly. I'm not going to be cooking it right away. I'm going to put the cover on and let it sit for a little while so that the sugar helps to naturally release some of those fruit juices. You don't have to do this. You can start cooking it right away if you want, but I like to do this process, this little extra step, because it just makes it easier to cook the jam since there's already some juice in it. Whereas if we were to turn the heat on now, it might take a little bit longer for it to come up to a nice liquidy, bubbly boil. But again, that is just a personal preference. You can definitely turn the heat on now. After a while, you can see that the juices have released. I didn't put any extra liquid in there. That's just the natural fruit juices. And it's already quite syrupy, which is nice. Now I'm going to get this mixture to boiling, so I'm going to turn it on to a high heat, making sure to watch it carefully. It will start to bubble pretty soon, and as you can see, there's a lot of foam in here. I personally leave the foam in my jams, but if you don't like it, you can scoop that out and just discard it. But it doesn't bother me, so I keep it in. Once it's come to a nice boil, I'm going to turn the heat down to a medium because I don't want it to burn. I just want it to stay at a rolling boil so that it thickens and any extra juices evaporate. You can see it's already getting nice and thick. If you have a candy thermometer or some other kitchen-safe thermometer that goes to 220 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, you can use that to help you with your jam making. The gelling point for jam is 225 degrees Fahrenheit. So if your thermometer reaches that temperature, then your jam should be nice and firm. I don't always use my thermometer. I am for the purposes of this video, just so you can see. But I've been making jam this way for so long that I pretty much know how the jam feels when it's nice and thick and when it will be set. So as I said, I don't use the thermometer all the time. You can see in this clip the jam is quite thick already, and I know it's going to be gelled and set nicely because of how it scrapes across the bottom, or how my spoon scrapes across the bottom of my pot. So I'm going to turn the heat off and get ready to start filling these jars. It's important to always use clean jars that are also hot when you're making jam. I just keep mine in the sink with some hot, clean water. After I wash the jars, I'll just fill the sink again and keep the jars in there with the hot water. I'll also put the flat lids in there, not necessarily the rings because they don't need to be hot. In this video, I've actually put the flat lids in this small pot of hot water, and I'm going to just bring over the jars and fill them that way. You want the jars and the flat lids to be hot because that helps create a seal, and then you won't have food spoiling. Another reason it's so important to make sure all your cooking tools and your canning tools are clean is because you don't want any food residue or any bacteria or dirt to be present in the jars when you fill them, because that could mean bacteria growth and food spoilage, and we don't want that. I have had a lot of requests to share some canning basics, and I'm certainly not an expert, so I don't want to say my way is the only way, but if you'd be interested in a video or a blog post about some canning information and some tools that I recommend everyone has, please let me know and I'll do my best to get that made for you. For this apricot jam, I just used a variety of jars, and I'm using a wide mouth funnel and a ladle to fill the jars. They are, of course, hot once they have the hot jam inside them. So if you have sensitive hands, I definitely recommend using a towel or a cloth to hold your jar in place while you're putting the lids on. You want to put the rings on the jars tightly, but not so tight that you can't get it off. Generally, just fingertip tight is sufficient. Usually when I make jam or other preserves, I keep my jars hot in the oven, just on the lowest temperature, and that works really well. But the kitchen was already very hot and I didn't want to heat it up any further, so that's why I decided to keep the jars in the sink full of hot water, and that worked just as well. I didn't have any jars that didn't seal properly. They all sealed just fine because the jars were hot before putting the jam in. If you are a person that enjoys step-by-step instructions and finds detailed tutorials to be most helpful, if you also expect to get perfect results every time, I don't think this recipe or this method is for you, if I'm being perfectly honest. It is a recipe and a method that I've developed over a few years of trial and error and experiments and research, but it doesn't always create a consistent product. There's a lot of factors to take into account when you're making jam using this method of low sugar and apples as a pectin source. Sometimes your jam might be a little bit more runny, it might be a little bit thicker, the color might vary from batch to batch depending on the type of fruit you're using, as well as its ripeness. But I think it's still worth giving a try because the jams created from this method are delicious and have much less sugar than store-bought jams or even jams using commercial pectin. I think if you have a candy thermometer or another food-safe thermometer that can reach the appropriate temperature, that will greatly help you create a consistent jam every single time. But, of course, it's not guaranteed. I hope that you will still consider trying this recipe. If you don't like apricot, you can definitely do strawberry jam. I've got a recipe for that on my channel, and I'll be sharing some more seasonal jam recipes throughout the rest of the summer. Thank you so much for coming along with this video, joining me in my kitchen as I make some apricot jam. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something. If you'd like a more detailed recipe, you can click the link in the description of this video and you'll be redirected to my blog where I'm going to be sharing a written recipe for convenience. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.